You know, the first thing I noticed wasn't the shattered picture frame of my late wife on the floor. It wasn't even the empty space on the mantel where her urn used to be. It was the sound. It was my son, Mark, on the phone in the kitchen, laughing, while the last physical trace of his mother was being swept into a dustpan. He was telling a friend he was clearing out the old junk to make space for a new TV. And in that one moment, all the grief I'd been carrying since Helen passed turned into something else. Something cold, quiet, and sharp as glass. For 40 years, this house wasn't just a house, it was our story. Helen and I bought it when we were barely older than Mark is now. It was a total wreck, but it was our wreck. We poured our youth into these walls, celebrated birthdays in this yard, and just held each other when life got to be too much. Every corner has a memory, but Helen's art studio, that was the heart of it all. It was a small, sunlit room at the back of the house where she painted. After she was gone, I couldn't bring myself to change a single thing. Her easel was still there, right where she left it, brushes in their jar, a half-finished canvas waiting for a touch that would never come. The real centerpiece, though, for the room and for my life, was the mural she painted on the main wall. It was this sprawling, vibrant landscape of the coast where we first met. It took her the better part of a year, and she poured her soul into every single brushstroke. It was her legacy. After she passed, I put her urn on a small mantel we'd built right underneath it. That room was my sanctuary. It was where I went to feel close to her, to tell her about my day, to just be with her. It was the one place where she didn't feel gone. Then I had a heart attack. It was sudden, terrifying, and it left me weaker than I'd ever been. Lying in that hospital bed, the doctors made it clear recovery was going to be slow. I'd need help. Mark, my only son, was the first person I called. I thought he was a good kid, just a little lost, you know. He'd been drifting since college, bouncing between jobs, never really finding his footing. So when he insisted on moving in to take care of me, I felt this wave of relief and pride. I'll handle everything. You just focus on getting better. Those first 2 weeks back home are a blur of pills and physical therapy. Mark was attentive, I'll give him that. He made my meals and handled my appointments. I was mostly stuck in my bedroom, just trusting him to take care of the house. He'd mentioned wanting to tidy up a bit, maybe modernize a few things. I was just too tired to argue and too grateful for the help to really question it. Just be careful with your mother's things, I remember mumbling before passing out. The change started with a phone call from my neighbor Carol. I don't want to alarm you, but there's a crew at your house. They're taking out the studio windows. A cold dread just crept up my spine. I thanked her, my voice barely a whisper, and slowly, carefully, I made my way out of my room. The hallway felt wrong. The family photos that had lined the walls for decades? Gone, replaced with these cheap, generic art prints. I pushed open the door to Helen's studio, and my world just fell apart. The sunlit room I loved was a sterile white box. The old windows were gone, replaced with a single massive pane of glass. A giant TV box sat in the middle of the floor. But the wall where her mural had been, it was just a blank, freshly painted slate of gray. Her easel, her paints, the mantel we built, all of it gone. And on the new cold floor I saw a small pile of dust and ceramic shards. A worker was sweeping it into a dustpan, her urn. That's when I heard him, my son. In the kitchen, his back to me, laughing on his phone. The sound echoed in the empty, hollowed-out house. He was telling his friend he'd finally convinced the old man to let him update the mausoleum. He said the house would be his soon anyway, so he might as well get a head start. I didn't yell. I didn't storm in. The shock was so deep it just burned away the anger, and all that was left was that cold, quiet clarity. I turned around, walked back to my room, and shut the door. My hands were perfectly steady when I picked up my phone. I didn't call Mark. I called my lawyer. I told him I needed to check my estate plan, specifically about the house. Helen and I had talked about signing it over to Mark eventually, and I had this vague memory of some papers, but with the fog of grief, I was never sure if we'd actually finalized it. Let me pull up the file. Here we go. It looks like an initial transfer document was drafted, but you never signed the final deed. It was never filed with the county. John, as far as the law is concerned, that house is still 100% in your name. The transfer was never completed. I just closed my eyes. The house was mine. The next evening I asked Mark to sit with me in the living room. He walked in, scrolling on his phone, looking annoyed. I just looked at this stranger, my son, sitting in my house. I went into the studio today, I said. My voice was calm even. He finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe? Where is she, Mark? I asked. She who? He frowned. Your mother, I said, my voice not wavering for a second. Where is her urn? He went pale. Oh, that. It got knocked over when they were working on the wall. It was an accident. I have the ashes saved. He kind of waved a hand vaguely toward the kitchen. I just nodded slowly, letting the silence hang there until he started to squirm. Look, Dad, Mom was great, but that room was a shrine. It wasn't healthy. We have to move on. We, I asked. There's no we in this, Mark. You did this. You came into my home while I was supposed to be recovering from a heart attack, and you destroyed the most precious thing I had left of your mother. He scoffed, getting his confidence back. Your home? Simone, Dad, we both know this house is going to be mine. You told me yourself you signed it over. That's where you're mistaken, I said, leaning forward. I thought so too. Which is why I called my lawyer yesterday. Turns out, we drafted some papers, but they were never signed. Never filed. This house, this land, everything, it is all still legally and completely in my name. The color just drained from his face. That entitled smirk he always wore just collapsed. For the first time, he didn't look like a man in control. He looked like a little boy who'd been caught red-handed. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice still quiet. "The crew isn't coming back. You have 30 days to get your TV and your other things out of here. You need to find somewhere else to live. And at the end of those 30 days, I'm changing the locks." He just stared at me, speechless. All that arrogance was gone, replaced by pure panic. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "That," I said, "is no longer my concern. You made your choice when you took a sledgehammer to your mother's memory. Now you get to live with it." The next 30 days were exactly what you'd expect. First came the pleading, then came the anger. He called me cruel, said I was throwing him out on the street. I got a flood of texts and voicemails from him, even from his friends, telling me what a horrible father I was. I didn't respond to any of them. I just let his storm of chaos happen around me. On the 30th day, he was gone. He took his TV, his clothes, and the cheap art, leaving blank spots on the walls. I had the locks changed that afternoon, and I spent the first night in true silence in my own home. And the quiet wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. Redemption, if that's what you want to call it, didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some grand apology. It started about 3 months later with a hesitant phone call. "Hi, Dad," he said, quieter than I'd heard him in years. "I just called to see how you are." He didn't ask for anything. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. The next week, he called again. And the week after that, one Saturday, he asked if he could come over. When I opened the door, he was holding a small, simple wooden box. He got a real job in construction. He started paying rent on a small apartment across town. A few months later, he called and asked if he could help with the studio. He said he'd learned about plaster and paint, and he knew he could never bring the mural back. But he wanted to help me make the room into a proper tribute again. He hasn't earned my forgiveness. Not yet. He's learning that redemption isn't a single act. It's the slow, hard work of proving you've changed. He destroyed something irreplaceable because of an entitlement I now realize I probably helped create. But for the first time in his life, he's taking responsibility. He's doing the work. The house is quiet now, and the studio is slowly being reborn. And in that stillness, I'm finding my own way to rebuild, not just a room, but what it means to be a family. So, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one.